Harper. I'm the chair of the Maidstone Council Economic Regeneration and Leisure Committee. I almost forgot that for a second. And as I say, welcome everyone to the meeting. We will be, as always, broadcasting this live, and it will be recorded for future playback and access. And I just ask if any member of the committee tonight or any visiting member wishes to or may want to record the meeting themselves. Obviously, you're more than welcome to, but it's just so that everybody else knows.
No surprise, I will reserve my right to do so.
Okay. Yeah, no, thank you, Malcolm. I take it nobody else does, so in that case, I'll just remind everybody, and I think we all know by now, but we use instant messaging to identify if you wish to ask any questions. And obviously, as members know, that the instant messaging is it's a public document as we're live now, and will be available with the webcast for anybody to look at subsequently. So at this stage, the other thing I need to say is that clearly, as we're doing the meeting on Skype, Olivia Parfitt, our committee clerk, will be looking after the Skype technology for us this evening, and that's not to change the role of any councillor and myself as chair. That's obviously just to help us with the system, as we're not sitting in the town hall. And so at that point, I'll ask Olivia if you could take us through the attendance list, please, and if people could confirm their attendance when Olivia reads out your name. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Good evening, members. I'll actually note that Councillor Bartlett has given his apologies this evening. Councillor Cox.
Present.
Councillor Fort.
Present.
Councillor Mrs. Gooch.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Harper.
Present.
Councillor Hinder.
Present.
Councillor Lewins.
Present.
I should have Councillor Perry present also.
Present, yes, substituting for Councillor Bartlett.
Thank you, Councillor. And Councillor Round.
Present.
And Councillor Webb.
Present.
Thank you, Chairman. That concludes the attendance.
Okay, thank you. Would you like now to read out the list of officers present, please, and any particular items they are presenting?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. So with us this evening, we have the Chief Executive, Alison Broom, the Head of Regeneration and Economic Development, John Foster, for item 15A, the Regeneration and Economic Development Manager, Chris Inwood, for item 14. We have the Museum Director, Victoria Barlow, for item 15A. We have Lucy Bailey, the Economics Director from Lichfields, for item 14. The Head of Finance, Ellie Dunnett, for item 15. Equalities and Corporate Policy Officer Orla Sweeney for item 15, and the Leisure Manager Mike Evans for item 16.
Thank you. So we now go back to the printed agenda as on the amended sheet. So item 1 is apologies for absence. I think we have apologies from Councillor Bartlett, and item 2 is notification of substitute members, and Councillor John Perry is substituting.
Yes, correct.
Thank you, John. So then that takes us on to agenda item 3, which is urgent items. We do have an urgent item tonight, which didn't go out of the original agenda, which is the report on the review of Maidstone Museum, item agenda 15A. And due to the level of public interest in that item, I'm intending to bring that item forward, and we will go after if everybody is happy with that, after agenda item number 13, reports of outside bodies, we'll go to the museum report and then continue the agenda in the order as printed. Is everybody happy that we do that?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Okay, great, thank you. Right, the next item is agenda item number 4, which is notification of visiting members. I think we have a couple of visiting members here tonight, so if you'd like just to introduce yourself, please.
Councillor Malcolm Mackay.
Me, Councillor Dave Nagy.
And I've noted that Councillor Mackay may wish to address us on our agenda item 15A, Maidstone Museum review, and Councillor David Nagy may wish to address us if he indicates on other items on the agenda this evening. So the next item is number 5, which is disclosure by members and officers. And at this stage, actually no, at this stage we just ask. So has anybody got anything they wish to disclose tonight from members or officers in respect to the agenda?
No.
No. Okay. I need just to clarify. I'll do it now rather than when we get to agenda item 15A. Obviously, as the chairman and the chair of the committee, Economic Regeneration Leisure, I am automatically appointed by the council to sit on the board of the Maidstone Museum Foundation. Obviously, that's not a non-pecuniary interest, and I clarified with our legal officer, Patricia Narabor, earlier on today that it is fine for me to take part in the meeting, as I do not have a significant interest in that. And she's provided a dispensation letter if anybody wishes to see that. So I shall be taking part in agenda item 15A. I don't know if anyone else has anything else, any other items to raise at that point. If not, we'll go on to agenda item number 16, which is disclosures of lobbying. And at this point, Olivia Parfitt, our committee, will go through members and ask each member in turn if they have any items where they have been lobbied tonight. So over to you, Olivia.
Thank you, Chairman. So, Councillor Cox.
15A and 16.
Councillor Fault. Councillor Fault. I'll come back. Councillor Mrs. Gooch.
Yes, item 15A.
Thank you. Councillor Harper.
Yeah, item 15A, and well, I suppose it's not been lobbied, but I've got a meeting on item 16 tomorrow on behalf of the council.
Thank you. Councillor Hinder.
No lobbying.
Thank you. Councillor Lewins.
Not that I'm aware. Thank you.
Councillor Perry.
Not that I'm aware. Thank you.
Councillor Webb.
None.
And I will just check again with Councillor Fort.
None.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you, Chairman. That concludes the lobbying.
Okay, thank you. That takes us on to agenda item number 7, to consider any of the items tonight should be taken in private session due to the nature of the information. And we have one item before us tonight, which requires us to go into private session, which is the paper 16 on Hazlitt theatre options. But other than that, I don't think there's anything here tonight which needs to be taken in private session. Can I seek the agreement of the committee to that?
Agreed.
Okay, thank you.
Agreed.
In which case, we now go on to agenda number 8, item 8, which is minutes of our meeting held on the 20th of October. So if people have got their papers in front of them, that's pages 1 to 4. And what I will do is I will go through page by page. So if anybody has an item of accuracy, if they could indicate as we go through. So page 1, page 2, page 3, and page 4. Okay, as nobody has indicated, can we agree those are a correct record of that last meeting?
Agreed.
Agreed.
And obviously at some point I'll have to arrange to sign off not only those minutes, but the minutes of all of our meetings now going back to March. So I'll have to have a pen ready when I go to Maidstone House next. So on that, without any further ado, we'll go on to item number 9, which is presentations of petitions. I am not aware of any petitions tonight for us. Item agenda number 10, questions and answer sessions from members of the public. Again, there are no questions from any members of the public this evening. And then item number 11 is questions from Members to the chair. Again, there are no questions. It takes us neatly on to agenda item number 12, which is page 5 of your agenda pack, which is the committee work programme. So over to John if he has any issues he wishes to raise at this stage.
Thanks, Chairman. Just one issue, actually. As members are aware, nationally we've gone into lockdown, and as a result of that, the government has made available grants to businesses, as they did last time. And there are two sets of grants. My team, the economic development team, is now going to be spending the next 4 to 6 weeks really supporting the business rates team and also leading on the discretionary grants applications, which we expect to be in the order of probably between 1,000 and 2,000 applications coming in from businesses that have been required to close. That's going to be an intensive piece of work over the next 4 to 6 weeks, and I do feel it's going to be force them to take away time that they would otherwise be working on the economic development strategy. So what I'd like to propose is the economic development strategy draft that was going to come to committee in December is put back until January.
No, that makes a lot of sense, John, that we do that. Any comments from any members in terms of the committee work programme at all?
Yes, can I comment, please, Chair? Martin here.
Oh, yeah, yes, Martin.
Can we squeeze in something somewhere, John? It doesn't really matter where it is, quite frankly, but just some mild update about the Innovation Centre, please. I was actually up there the other day and I thought, God, it's remarkable how big and how marvellous it is at the moment. So it can't be long before we'll actually be doing something in it, I assume.
Yeah, still programmed to open in the summer of next year. Some great progress is being made. So I'm sure we can either do a briefing paper or a presentation at some point in the very near future.
Thank you.
Okay, I've seen that we've got Councillor Nagy as a visiting member would like to say something to the committee programme.
Yeah, thanks, Chairman. I'd just like to ask Mr. Foster, are those grants available to only new people or people that got grants before in the last batch? Could they reapply?
Well, it depends which grant you're talking about. In terms of the mandatory local restrictions grant, they are businesses who are being obliged to close by law will be eligible for these grants. And a subset of those are those in the retail, hospitality and leisure sector, which were the ones that primarily benefited from the last round. So the answer is yes, those that benefited last time will be able to benefit this time if they are a ratepayer.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. And Faye Good.
Thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to support Mr. Foster's suggestion that we just put back the strategy. I mean, we're really so looking forward to it. It's a very important document, but really the business grants is so important for our economy, and of course fully understand their reasons for putting it back. And I just wanted to support the suggestion that it goes to January committee, if that'll be all right, actually. But so far so good, I guess. Thank you.
Yeah, no, I think it's, yeah, I was talking with John about this earlier in the week. I don't think we'd be putting officers under unfair pressure, given the work they have to do at the moment with the lockdown and the grants, to expect the economic strategy in a month's time. And I don't want it rushed. And what I think we all want to make sure that we do the proper work. So
absolutely, yes.
The slippage makes perfect sense. Mark Cox, I see.
Really, on that very point, doesn't the work programme show the economic development strategy at the March meeting, or was that an approval of the draft that would have come earlier?
Yep, that's sorry, Chairman. The idea is that the draft would have come for approval for public consultation purposes, or for business and for consultation purposes. That we would have got that feedback, amended the draft and presented to you for final approval. So it'll just be delayed slightly.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Yes, so if we can agree to note the work programme, the amendments on that one item, is everybody happy with that?
Agreed.
Great. Okay, in which case we'll now go on to agenda item number 15, which is the urgent item, which is on the review of Maidstone Museum. And that's on pages 85 to 105 of the amended agenda, which was sent out. We received hard copies of earlier in the week. Before I invite the officers to present the report, Mark Baker from the Maidstone Museum Foundation, who's the chair of the Maidstone Museum Foundation, would like to address the committee at this point. So over to you, Mark. Mark, are you there still? Can one of the officers contact, try to get hold of Mark and make sure that, because we're ready for him to do.
Okay.
Am I okay now?
Yeah, you're okay now. Yeah, go ahead, Mark.
Thank you so much.
You're on mute.
Oh, was I really? Right. Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, for allowing me to speak this evening. Well, I am Mark Baker, Chairman of the Trustees of Maidstone Museums Foundation, and I've been asked to make this presentation on behalf of the whole of the MMF. And I have a printed copy of this presentation for the convenience of the committee clerk. Well, as members may know, Maidstone Museums Foundation is an independent registered charity set up about 30 years ago to support our local museum in every way. That objective is still true today. Currently, our membership stands at about 500 people and is still growing. Maidstone Museums Foundation is a member of the British Association of Friends of Museums, which is a UK-wide organisation supporting all Friends groups and underpinning culture and heritage. Thus, through this membership, we are very well aware of what is happening to the sector nationally. Our starting point here is to recognise fully the current circumstances and the need to make savings council-wide. Further, it is clear that the museum needs to contribute to savings as effectively as possible, whilst not adversely affecting the community-wide asset that is the museum. In consideration of this, we ask members to be aware that the decisions reached here may affect the very future of the museum, including its accreditation. We note that the report states in paragraph 1.2 that a guidance objective is to make sure any changes are reversible. In our opinion, this is easily said, but difficult to achieve. Now, we regret to say that we found the officer's report very disappointing. There are statements made without clear explanation or rationale, observations made about MMF, many of which are wrong, and no clarity over to why only 4 options for savings are presented when others are clearly exist. We have 4 key comments to make about the report contents. First, paragraph 1.9 deals with the MMF itself. We have much concern with what is written here, especially regarding 3 matters. 1, MMF do not just raise money for the museum. Yes, we do, but do much more besides. Volunteering, progressing joint projects with the museum, presentations, and raising the museum's profile. 2, the 4th line states the museum director will seek to redefine the relationship between the museum and MMF regarding fees and how they are used. Well, we ask, what fees and whose fees? This statement is very ambiguous, but also concern is that this is the first we have heard of such a motion. Would it not have been courteous to raise the matter with us first before unilaterally putting pen to paper? Okay, 3. In the last 6 lines of the paragraph, it refers to MMF collecting monies in the donations boxes then given to the museum. Well, members need to be advised that this was at the officer's request, as the donations can benefit from gift aid, by going through the MMF, as long as a donor says so in a form or envelope. Thus, in the end, the museum can benefit by receiving more in donations than are actually given. We therefore do not understand why the report suggests that the museum will seek to return this income to the museum directly so that it counts towards museum income rather than MMF. Well, this needs explanation, we suggest. Okay, second, the use of the term annualized hours in paragraph 2.2 and table 2. We did not understand this and had to look it up. Perhaps members have too. We gather that an annualized hours contract is an employment contract where the employee's working hours are calculated on an hourly rather than a daily or weekly basis. And those hours are at times stipulated by the employer during the year. But there is no detail in paragraph 2.2 to explain what that means to the museum. So we do not know how this would affect staff contracts, the numbers of staff affected, the levels of staff affected, etc. This paragraph is just a broad brush statement lacking clarity, which we feel is critical to any decision making. And third, we are of the opinion that the 4 options presented are not worked up in sufficient detail to permit a decision to be made. Further, there are, it seems to us, other options that should be considered. Fourth, one of the options put forward suggests regular museum charging, to which I have to say the MMF objects. We appreciate the need to look into this matter to seek avenues to increase income. But the relevant paragraphs do not set out a compelling case, evidence-based, for such action. Indeed, the Dover example in paragraph 2.8 suggests quite the opposite. The visitor figures next year are going to be impacted by COVID, even in the best scenarios. And the habit of museum going may be broken for some and take time to re-establish. Hence, charging only adds to the challenge. The critical place of the museum in our community must be recognised. The importance to young people and their learning is critical, as evidenced by a conversation currently ongoing between Ofsted and schools regarding the use made by schools of local cultural capital, in which the museums hold a key role. So too is the relevance of the museum as an asset to the council that contributes to its place-making agenda, to the sustaining of the town centre, and to the social and well-being benefits it seeks to provide. So in conclusion, we are of the view that 1, the museum's revenue savings target should be up to 25% on controllable costs, as suggested. 2, however, we would suggest that this committee defers any decision on how the savings are made, allowing an opportunity for the museum, members' representatives, and key partners to meet and consider all the options. Indeed, MMF would be happy to participate in such an exercise. Then a further report is brought back to this committee at its next meeting. So, thank you for the opportunity, Mr. Chairman, to present this statement. That's it.
Thank you very much for that clear statement of some of your requests. So, at this stage, I will ask Mr. Foster, John Foster, if he would like to introduce the report.
Thank you, Chairman. As set out in the report, COVID-19 has had a significant impact on the Council's finances. This has led to an estimated shortfall of around £8 million in this financial year, and the need to find savings in the order of £3 million next year, and a little bit more the following year. And as a result, obviously members have been asked to look at the services across the whole of the council and look at prioritising services. The level of savings required is around 15% of the council's annual budget. And where members have looked at the various priorities within the council, and some have come up higher than others, the museum is one of those ones that came slightly lower than others, and therefore it's proposed that the savings being offered from the museum are higher than the sort of average 15%. Hence why the suggestion is that a minimum of 25% of those savings are found on the net budget, but also that some other key considerations are looked at, including access to the museum's collections is maintained, and any changes that are made are reversible. So the museum is introduced, the museums are introduced together with some of the key stakeholders as well. Yes, the Maidstone Museum Foundation is referenced here. I appreciate that perhaps we didn't fully set out all the good work that the museum, the MMF does, particularly in terms of the volunteering and the support they give to the museum, with the focus on finances. I apologise for that. I'm not aware of any wrong statements in there. The reason for mentioning the re-establishing or redefining our relationship is a number of fronts. We do hope we can work with the MMF to identify many more volunteers that can work with us, to identify the membership fees that MMF raise for their members and the discounts that then can be used in the museum. But also to seek to get a much better return on the donations and the gift aid that at the moment isn't being claimed. So there's lots of opportunities there for us to work closely together, and I'm really looking forward to doing so after this report. But I hasten to add, this is a high-level strategic report, looking at the priorities that the council is aiming to achieve. And I should point out as well that this committee was due to meet next week, I think it was, but has been brought forward in order that the recommendations of this committee in terms of the savings possible can be taken into account by Policy and Resources Committee, which is going to be meeting on the 25th. So that's a really important timescale. So table 1 does show the basic budgets in terms of sort of for the museum for this year. Expenditure of 609,150, and that's made up of around £500,000 worth of staff costs, and the rest are non-staff costs. There are some building costs there, income that is largely from shop and sale of other items such as, venue hire, room hire, events, activities, temporary exhibitions, etc., to get to the total of 746,000. Hence, 25% of that is 186,000 recommended in the report for the savings. We've looked at a number of options that would deliver savings, and from closing of the museum right the way through to opening 4 days a week rather than the 5 that is happening at the moment, albeit 6 with summer opening on Sunday. And what we've suggested is that we would like to look into further is the idea of annualized hours. And at the moment, that's looking at the potential of trying to respond much better to when the museum is quiet, when we might want to close more than just close completely, for example, but that would enable us to open for much longer, maybe 5, 6 or even 7 days a week during the really busy times, say in the summer holidays. So that's something that we would like to look into. It results in the same amount of savings, but responds much better to the busier and quieter times. We've recommended option 4 simply because, in many respects, because the amount of savings there are close to the target savings, but not quite enough, and so would have to be supplemented in some other way. We have suggested that we would like to investigate further the idea of admissions charging, We know that comes with a lot of caveats, some of which are, what that might do to visitor numbers, and I've set out in the table table 2 there an example. I mean, it's crystal ball gazing because we haven't done the research yet. We haven't done the customer research, and there could be a whole different range of admission charging packages for children, for adults, for families, annual charging. That all needs to look into what is the right price point, if at all, and then also we've got to make sure that the museum is still accessible for those families on very low incomes. So there would be a lot to consider, but what we're suggesting is we keep that on the table and we investigate it alongside other opportunities to increase income and make savings. We touch briefly on where we have looked elsewhere at raising income from the museum shop and the cafe and other core grant services to not such great effect over the years. And we've looked at the pros and cons of each one of the options and the impact on each one of the options, and they are set out in the appendices. But we also touched on the opportunities around innovation and technology, particularly with regards to keeping access open to the collections, or giving more access to the collections, virtual tours, more use of animation, which I think some of you may have already seen on our website, and really opportunities to explore the greater use of technology, potentially also in understanding our customers better as well. So I'd just like to conclude really that what we're looking for here is a recommendation on some principles on the high level of savings. The idea then is that officers would go away and do some much more detailed work on how that might be delivered, talking and working with stakeholders such as the MMF, and obviously having further detailed conversations with staff, because they may come up with ideas themselves that might help us generate the top line figure. So I'll stop there. Thanks, Chairman.
Thank you, John. At this point, before we proceed, I'd just like to ask if either Councillor Mackay or Councillor Nagy, as visiting members, would like to address the committee on the item.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. At the moment, I have nothing to say. I'll probably leave my comments till P&R.
Okay, Councillor Nagy.
Yeah. Are we saying then that we can't? The museum has to have cuts, otherwise it has to shut down. I can't understand what we're saying. Is it it's losing money and we need to save money? Because when this has come up in the past over the years, the museums have always been suggested at other over the years that there might be an asset the museum could sell to keep things going. I don't know if that's a possibility, but that's what's always happened in the past, because obviously we can't afford to lose our museum, and needs must in times, especially in times that we find ourselves. So I was just wondering if that is an option that the committee could have a look at tonight.
Thank you. I mean, David, we're not looking at. I mean, the museum doesn't run, in the sense of sort of running at a loss. The museum runs with a budget from the council, as John said earlier, and as we know, every service across the council which has income this year in particular obviously is being badly impacted. The museum's had a good few months of closure in the first lockdown earlier in the year, and it's clearly at the moment we're closed again, so we won't be receiving any income at the moment. So the issue isn't around income. The issue, if you like, is that as John Owen said, all services have to look to make savings, and we're looking this evening to see what we consider to be an appropriate saving to come from the museum as part of contributing to the council's overall package. And we need obviously to recommend we're being requested to recommend a figure which can then go forward in the papers to Policy and Resources, where obviously quite a number of the people on this meeting tonight will have a second chance to have an input as it goes up there. Before I open up to
I was just come back on that. I was just thinking, well, if we're going to make lots of cuts, will the cuts affect it if it reopens in February? If cuts have already been reinstated, is the option to put them back in at a later date if possible?
We're not. Well, I mean, it's obviously down to the committee as to the direction they wish to go. But I suspect the committee is not going to be recommending that the museum close. That the museum will remain open under a scenario similar to the ones being suggested. And as John referred to, and I'm sure all members of this committee would want, is that if the financial situation of the council were to change between now and April, that any proposal is clearly reversible. And even going forward, we would look, if we could do at some point in the future when council funding became different, that we may wish to reinstate expenditure or boost expenditure on the museum. We're trying to make sure that we don't do anything now which would cause, I suppose, irreparable damage to the museum. I mean, that's the underlying thrust of where we are. But anyway, thank you for your question. Hopefully that answers it. But before I go on, I see we've got Martin Cox and Faye Gooch wants to speak. But before I go on any further, I just wanted to inform the committee that following publication of this item on Friday, I've had a lot of discussion and negotiations with the four groups on the committee, so the Liberal Democrat group, the Independent group, and the Conservative group. And I've also had considerable discussions with our council officers and John, and with the Victorian, with the Chief Executive, with Alison, on this item to look at a way forward, which I think would meet the request which is being presented, asked us to look at savings, but also meet some of the questions which have been raised by members of the committee. Now, I'm either quite happy to go through what those suggestions would be now in terms of a motion, or quite happy to wait until we've had an element of debate, and then I can refer them to you at that point. That's in your hands, really. So just before we go, I start to take people, I just wanted to check as to, do you want me to suggest to go through what I will be proposing now, or would you like
Happy to listen to those, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, right.
It may stop a lot of possible or potential comment. I don't know.
Okay, if the rest of the committee is happy with that, unless anybody
Agreed.
Yes. Okay, thank you. Well, the proposals I have before tonight, there's actually 6, and I'll read them out quite slowly so people can follow. Okay. So the first one is that the following to be added to the objectives in paragraph 1.2. And just for reference to people, paragraph 1.2 is on page 92 of the papers. So the 2 additions to add to the 3 there now is, firstly, that the museum's accreditation status is maintained, and secondly, that volunteers be at the heart of Maidstone Museum in conjunction with professional officers along the lines of the National Trust model. Secondly, that the objectives for securing the future service provision for Maidstone museums in paragraph 1.2, clearly as amended, are agreed, including a revenue savings target of a minimum of £152,000. So I'm proposing £152,000 of savings as opposed to the £186,000 in the report. And at the end of going through this, I'll explain the rationale for 152. Thirdly, that savings proposals set out in option 4, table 2, with respect to the reduced opening hours and a saving of a minimum of £138,000 are agreed in principle to take effect no later than April 2021. And the committee is regularly updated to provide assurance that the risks identified in designing and implementing changes in the operation model for the museums are being mitigated appropriately. Fourthly, that a further report is presented to this committee with respect to an additional savings package to achieve the minimum target of £152,000 to take effect no later than April 2022. Fifthly, that the Council engages with key stakeholders, including the Maidstone Museum's Foundation, with respect to service delivery outcomes to be achieved while working within these parameters. And lastly, six, that a further report is presented to the committee setting out how the existing capital allocation to the museum can be used to make the best use of our resources, address accessibility to the collections, and reduce the net revenue cost to the museums. Now, I just want to explain, and obviously most of those hopefully are reasonably understandable. The rationale for proposing a reduced savings figure of £152,000, that comes from if we look at the table. If you look at table 1 in paragraph 1.17 on page 94, you have expenditure of £609,000, and there's the museum buildings of £273,000. I'm suggesting the £152,000 is actually still a 25% saving, but it's a 25% saving on the expenditure line of £609,000, which is the controllable expenditure. Clearly, as we look in the options in table 2, the building costs remain constant through the options, as one would to some extent expect. And actually, Olivia's now putting up the proposal I'm suggesting. So hopefully that gives members a feel as to the proposals which have come out, as I say, from discussions with officers and with the group spokesperson from the other groups on the committee. And at this point, before I won't ask for a seconder at this point, but I think I'll open up to debate. And at the moment, we have Faye Gooch, Martin Cox, and Jill Ford. So, Faye, if we could go over to you, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I think there is so much that could be said. Obviously, there needed to be a quick and dirty report, if I may respectfully put it like that, in order to meet the timescales, because I know that we have to move swiftly. I deeply regret that we weren't able to share our ideas with or share the report with stakeholders, but we are where we are. I think it's very important that we stay at a strategic level and not preempt any details. Now, for example, the annualisation of hours, it needs to be reversible. There are some key red lines for here, for me certainly, and that is that we cannot lose our professional staff because we can't get them back again. This touches on the point that Councillor Nagy brought up. You can't just shut a museum. It's got too much value, there's too much impact. But certainly the suggestions that you've brought forward here, I think do help to clear the way forward so that discussions can take place and will take place and open the door to more volunteer work. Thank you. I'll leave it at that at the moment. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, thank you, Faye. Apologies for the IM, but for some reason, every time I type in brackets C for Cox and R for round, it comes up with a cup of coffee and a rainbow. But if we could go to Martin Cox, Jill, then Martin Round, then John Ferry at the moment. So Martin, over to you, please.
I will assume I'm a cup of coffee and just say thank you very much for Mr. Baker from MMF coming to talk to us as a committee, as the chair of trustees.
Here, well said, Martin. I should have said that as well. Well done, Mark. Thank you.
I think many of the points are obviously needed to be said from one of the people who we work in partnership with to bring the museum to the people of Maidstone. I believe the only reason why the item about the money boxes was raised was to check, I suppose, that we were using the small donations scheme, which makes it possible to claim 25% on cash donations of 30% or less. This could bring in up to around £2,000 in any one tax year, but those things can be looked at by the charity itself, and obviously those were the things that we were talking about, I think, in the report. Faye has mentioned about the annualised hours, which would give us flexibility. I want to hear from our staff. I want to hear from key stakeholders, and I want there to be talks and also the consultation that would follow the decision I hope we'll be able to make tonight. With my hat on as chair of P&R, I'm keen to hear what this committee can put forward as the savings that they can find for potentially the next 3 years. And I think the way in which Councillor Nagy spoke highlights the need for us to be very clear about how we will handle this, because residents must not think that next week the museum will close. Things may have to change for an amount of time. So I think the key article here is we wish it to be reversible, but at the same time, we don't want to lose the museum's accreditation status, which I would like clarified by officers. I think the objective of the future service provision and the savings that we can achieve at 152 is a balanced view that the chairman has brought to us. I think we're almost going in to be too prescriptive, but I think option 4 or somewhere between the two of option 3 and 4 may be what comes out. But I believe we need to listen to the public as well when we make a decision and we let that decision play out. I think it's going to be key to talk and find out how that's affecting the visitors who come. Are they from out of the county, out of the country? Because all I want to say, no more about charging, is that I have been to plenty of other countries where they have extrapolated €5 from me to walk across an elevated section above some beautiful mosaics and look at mummies and all that sort of thing that we can do in our fantastic museum that is in our town and has been here and has been looked after in such a way that we do not want to see it close. But in these times that we find ourselves in, it is key that the public understand these measures will be taken for a certain length of time and evaluated all the way through the process that will bring us out of the other side in 3 years' time. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Martin. We go now to Jill.
Oh, thank you. I do agree that we need to reduce the costs. However, I don't think we've sort of fully investigated this enough. I'm sure there must be some business opportunities. I know that the cafe and the shop haven't been much of a success because of the lack of passing trade, but there was some comments about room hire and parties, etc. And they weren't successful. I just wanted to know what has ever been done to advertise that and advertise or market those sort of activities.
Victoria, would you like to answer that particular point in terms of the income in these couple of streams?
That's better. Am I unmuted? The parties and room hire actually were first marketed on their own as a special as a separate offer were publicised through marketing promotional material, so leaflets, about 3 or 4 years ago, and we have those leaflets online. They're also on our website with pictures of what's possible, and we also have promoted them through social media.
I think Victoria, I think the point is sort of what's the sort of potential sort of quantum of the number of hires, I mean, and sort of parties, because I know obviously from our discussions that we get a reasonable number.
Yes, I mean, it's a very seasonal product. I would say that we were building quite a good room hire business just before COVID, thanks. And birthday parties, we were at full capacity, which is, 2 parties a day at weekends in the summer, but often we find the school holidays, people don't book parties because children are away. And obviously in winter, our opening was less. Without the figures in front of me, I'm inclined to say that both of those uses have reached a point where they are stable. They have grown, obviously, from when we started, but they've remained fairly static for a couple of years now.
Thank you. Jill, does that answer your points?
Yeah, it does. I mean, personally, I think it's a wonderful building, and I would have thought you could have really marketed it and got room hire. I mean, it's just one of those things. I think we could gain something more.
I think, and I'm sure as we go through and working with the officers and with MMF, that no stone's going to be all stones will be looked underneath. I think that's got to be obviously the approach we're doing. So I'm sure we'll look at where we have been doing things like room hires, and I think as Victoria says, the parties have built up quite successfully so that shows that we know that we can provide product. We just need to sort of think afresh as to how we might do some variations to get a product like that. What I was now going to do is if you're happy, Jill, take Martin round.
Thank you, Chair. The first thing I want to say is to thank you. And it has been well said that you and I and a number of other parties have been widely debating this for some days now. In fact, you first contacted me immediately on Friday afternoon. And I have to say, and the public and other members will also be interested to know that we were still discussing this at 3:30, 4 o'clock this afternoon. So we have reached a number of common goals. And in that respect, thanking you very much, Chair, for being so proactive and doing a lot of work in that respect. On the basis of that, I mean, I think we're all fully agreed that we're stuck between a rock and a hard place, quite frankly. We all love the museum in some shape or form, would love to keep it open, but we know we're in a different climate at the moment, and we need to address a number of issues. But let's use this as an opportunity rather than a problem. And can I just ask that out of the recommendations, in number 4, we can just include 1 or 2 more words, because then we won't need to get down to the pedantics. We won't need to go down into too much detail, and we can leave a lot more discussion for later as a new report emerges. Because when you consider the very insightful information, and really hitting the nail on the head a number of times on the presentation by MMF, I think we need to put in a couple of key words that will help everybody and give us plenty of opportunity to take it further. And at number 4, I suggest that the council engages with key and prospective stakeholders. and then we can work on a lot of other issues, take a few ideas forward. We can all contribute a great deal, and we can all work on it.
I'm just writing that down, Martin. Yeah, I mean, I think actually we had those words. If we had it, because on number 5 we've got that the council engage with key stakeholders, and then perhaps we could add in at that point prospective stakeholders. That's probably the best, because then
as long as we're looking at proactive ways rather than just simple reactive ways.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm going to, obviously, after I've heard people talking, I'm going to, give some of my views. But yes, I definitely pick up your point and agree on the need to be proactive. So if you're happy at that stage, John, Martin, I could take John, because John's concerned that I've managed to forget him, but I haven't. It's not like the other night where you got left out, John.
He was next.
That's all right, Paul. Sorry, Chairman. Don't worry. Look, I'm a new boy on this, and I haven't obviously had a chance to see the papers, and I'm reading them off the computer screen. But I just got a question. Mr. Baker, when he talked about there are other options apart from option 4, and I'm assuming what you're coming up with is kind of derived from option 4, but there are other options, and I just wanted to make sure that whatever we agree or decide on, that it doesn't rule out these other options. And I think Martin probably said it, but I think it's quite important, because if there are other ways of approaching this, then clearly we need to take those into account. So, I mean, it does have a feeling, and I'm coming this obviously from the outside a bit, but it does feel it's all a bit rushed, and I'm a bit worried that we're go steaming in. We've got to make a decision, and it's a danger. Unless we're careful, we might actually end up making the wrong decision. So I want to make sure that at least these other options, if they are, and I don't actually know what they are at this stage, but if there are other options, then they will be considered. Thank you.
Thank you, John. I mean, at the moment, I can't see anybody else in the IM, so I can answer your point, John. One of the things I'm expecting is, if we agree the proposals tonight I've outlined with those extra couple of words, thank you from Martin, is that there is a large amount of work. Bob, if I can take you just after I finish, that's okay. There's a large amount of work to be done between now and, I imagine, the sort of middle part of January. And no stone is to be left unturned. We will engage with, as we say, key stakeholders and prospective key stakeholders, whilst, if you like, what's brought us to the situation tonight is obviously the need to make budget cuts or budget savings. I think we need to take the opportunity of sort of looking afresh at the whole museum in terms of sort of shifting the culture in a way, and I'm very much thinking we've got a one-off opportunity here to sort of change the culture of the museum. The museum's very good, and don't get me wrong, I love going there, but I think we can make it more inclusive in terms of the community by bringing in more volunteers and more people, more different aspects. I think we can strengthen the museum, and we can end up strengthening our paid professional staff as well as volunteers, and having something so much more vibrant that, when we're sitting here perhaps when it might take a year or perhaps longer to get that whole sort of concept pulled through this, as I say, the sort of national trust model. But when we've got there, we'll look back and we think, wow, why didn't we do this years ago? Because we've now got a really vibrant museum. And I know I've spoken with Martin, we've talked about potentials for research, given our international collections, the Japanese and the Brenchley. I just think there's so many opportunities. And I think working with a range of current and new stakeholders as we work through proposals, yes, there's a massive amount of stuff to sort of go through and people to talk to over the next over the next couple of months, especially initially, as we say, we need to have a package to deliver the first tranche of savings in place for the 1st of April next year. But that's just the start. I mean, the process I'm sort of thinking we need to kick off now is one, as I say, which will take us quite a long time. And at the end of it, we'll have a museum which is vibrant in different ways to what it is now. And I think when the money becomes available in the future, the transformation project, which we were all really enthused about, it seems probably about a year ago now, but the way things have moved on, we will be really ready to go for that. And once I say, when things like the Heritage Lottery Fund and others are available, they'll look at the new Maidstone Museum and they say, my God, how could we ever turn them down for money? So I'm looking at this as a real opportunity for us to really be, to have something much better at the end of it, something much, it'll be different, but it'll be much more sustainable, and it'll bring the community in. And having the community working along paid staff is such an opportunity, and it's one I think we can really now look to capture on, not just retired people, but younger people. I know that the museum does quite a lot of work with schools, and particularly primary schools. We could have work experience. There's so many opportunities actually there waiting for us to look into. And this is where I feel that we're now, at that cornerstone. This is the time to go for it. We've all talked, I know, as committee members, I've only been on this for 3 years, but I know, speaking with my colleagues, that, we've been looking at doing this sort of, if you like, this shift for years and never quite doing it. So I think it's time to do it now, and to have the pride we all have in our museum, and to get it going at a different level, and with much more community involvement and much more outward looking. I think we've got a real good foundation to go forward from.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you. I agree with what you're saying. Very infectious.
It's almost evangelical. I know it probably sounds like that. I'm sorry about that.
No, it's okay. It's okay. I like enthusiasm. That's very good.
Bob, you've got a question you'd like to ask?
Yes, it's just a sort of statement and a question. Because I firmly believe that there are a hell of a lot of people in Maidstone that treasure the culture that is there and wouldn't want to see it taken away or damaged in any way. But that's one group of people. The other group of people that we've heard about this evening, but I would like to try and find out what their feelings are the actual staff that work in the museum. We've got two options here, option 3 and option 4, talking about annualised working hours. How much has any discussion taken place with the staff, making them aware of what could possibly happen, and has any measurement been taken of their understanding and their agreement to it?
I don't know if one of the officers would like to sort of answer that.
In brief, Chairman, yeah. So all staff are aware of the report and are aware of the necessity of the report. I don't want to get into a lot of detail, because following on from the recommendations of this committee, then obviously I want to have much more detailed conversations with all of the members of staff. I would say that when we did have that discussion, we mentioned annualised hours, and at least one member of staff understood it, had worked in that situation before, and recognised the benefits of being able to respond much more positively to those busier times of the year when the venue is going to be open longer.
Thank you.
Okay. At this point, can I ask if anyone else would like to raise any questions or make any points? If not, could I ask Olivia if you could put my proposal back on the screen so people have got a chance just to read it through again.
Can I just ask Paul briefly? Martin says he's happy to second. Is that him seconding this particular proposal? Can you just confirm that, please?
Martin? He put yes in the IM. Is that okay, Martin? it's very difficult having two of the leading members.
Sorry,
Yes.
Either Martin, I'm happy for it to be, but I did say, but I'm happy if, as the new vice chairman, if Martin would like to take that, I'm happy to do that.
No, fine. I'm happy you to second. Fine, carry on.
And the one amendment we wanted to put in, I think, was in number 5, wasn't it? Yes. You've typed it in. Thank you for doing that. Yes.
Yeah, it's in.
Stakeholders. Yeah. Right. Okay. If I just give people just a second to read it back through, make sure you understand. So has everybody had long enough to read it?
Yep.
Okay, in which case, if we can now, if everybody is happy, if we can go and put it to the vote, and I'll ask Olivia to take us through the roll call process, please. So those in favour of the proposals, if they can say yes, and anyone against, obviously say no. So Olivia, over to you to do the roll call, please.
Thank you, Chairman. If I can just clarify that all recommendations are being taken together.
I've heard no dissent from anyone, so I would suggest yes.
Thank you. Councillor Cox.
4.
Councillor Fort.
4.
Councillor Mrs. Gooch.
4.
Councillor Harper.
4.
Councillor Hinder.
4.
Councillor Lewins.
4.
Councillor Perry.
4.
Councillor Round.
4.
And Councillor Webb.
4.
Thank you, Chairman. That was unanimously 4.
Thank you for doing the count, and thank you very much, members, for endorsing that unanimously. We've got a really good track record on this committee of working together, and I'm almost taken aback really by the support I've received for that motion after the work we've all done this week. But anyway, so thank you all very much for helping us move on. So we can go back to the agenda papers now, and the next one is item number 14, which is Victoria.
Outside bodies.
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah, we haven't done outside bodies. Report of outside bodies. We don't have any reports before us this evening from outside bodies. So that takes us on to number 14, which is the evidence base for the revised economic development strategy. I think that's going to be introduced by Chris, and then I know Lucy, I think, is going to do a presentation for us. Over to you, Chris.
Good evening, Chairman, Vice Chairman, members. The aim of tonight's report is to present an analysis of key data set findings from the State of the Nation report prepared by our economic development consultants, Litchfields. This work is going to act as our evidence base to help inform, shape and support sections within the revised economic development strategy. The State of the Nation report is divided into 5 key themes: employment, business, population, labour market and COVID-19, using all of the latest data that is currently available, and it supplements Litchfield's early analysis on emerging COVID-19 related economic impacts and implications for the borough that was published in the summer. Without taking any further thunder away from our consultant's presentation, I would now like to reintroduce Lucy Bailey, the Economic Director of Litchfield's Committee. Lucy will present her analysis of the key findings, and there will be an opportunity for a Q&A at the end of her presentation. So Lucy, would you like me to share my screen with the presentation, or would you like to do that yourself?
Thanks, Chris. Shall I try and give it a go and see if I can access it okay. On my end? Just bear with me 1 second.
No probs, thank you.
say, Lucy, while you're doing it, just bear in mind when the agenda paper was sent out, it was obviously sent out in black and white. So I think it'd be useful as you go through, especially your more coloured, some of the graphs, obviously, people might have had a bit of a problem trying to understand. So, you know, it'd be good in terms of obviously having a coloured presentation. Thank you.
Yeah, brilliant, Woody.
Chairman, if I can interrupt, it may be easier if it's displayed via the screen rather than actually being sent across as a presentation.
Right. I mean, yes.
It says it's loading my end. I've just tried to share the screen. It's taking a few minutes. Apologies. Hopefully it'll come up.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Is that visible to everyone?
Yeah. Yes.
Great. Good start. Okay. Well, thanks very much for the introduction, Chris, and Mr. Chairman for your introduction as well. And thanks very much for inviting me along this evening to take part in the committee meeting. I think most of you probably know me by now. This isn't the first time I've taken part in the committee. I'm Lucy Bailey, Economics Director at Lichfields. And I've been asked by Chris, John and the team to provide a quick overview of the State of the Nation report that we've recently prepared for Maidstone as part of the wider work that we're doing to update the borough's economic development strategy. So the purpose of that piece of work is to provide a refreshed evidence base and economic baseline for the borough in terms of current economic performance, recent trends, and how these compare with its neighbouring authority areas and the wider sort of Kent, South East and UK as a whole, to then frame suitable responses and actions through the strategy itself. So as Chris mentioned just a minute ago, the analysis is grouped by theme, covering employment, business, population and labour market, as well as emerging implications from the COVID-19 pandemic. And I'll run through each of those briefly in turn. And it's important just to note up front that the findings are based on latest available data and statistics, but inevitably represent a point in time assessment. And clearly the economy is subject to greater than usual disruption at the moment, and the borough's performance across these various different economic indicators will change over time. The report itself is included in the committee pack, as was mentioned a minute ago. Hopefully you'll have had a chance to at least glance over that, but appreciating it was in black and white, so might not have made as much sense as it could have done. So I'll briefly run through the key findings this evening, given that there's quite a lot in there to digest, so I want to kind of canter through fairly quickly. So beginning with employment, the borough accommodates a sizable economy with over 91,000 workforce jobs at the last count, with only one of its neighbours, Medway, recording more jobs than Maidstone. But it's been growing more slowly than its neighbouring authorities in terms of job growth over recent years, and also more slowly than the average recorded across Kent, the wider region and the UK over that time period. The chart on this slide shows how local employment is broken down by main sector, with the red bars, hopefully you can just about pick those out on the slide, representing Maidstone, the green bar representing Kent, the orange sort of yellowish colour representing South East, and the blue representing the UK as a whole. And as we can see from that chart, local employment is dominated very much by public sector, administration and support services more generally, as well as healthcare and construction, which together make up over 40% of the borough's job base, those four sectors alone. So clearly they're overrepresented compared with other areas. That reflects its county town role, unsurprisingly, but also means that some of the higher value sectors elsewhere in the economy, like professional services, computing and ICT, telecoms, that type of thing, all have a much more limited presence locally. In spatial terms, these maps on the slide here show where and how jobs are distributed across the borough. Unsurprisingly, we can see large concentrations in and around Maidstone town, so the town centre, its industrial estates, the business parks. but it also underlines the important role that smaller settlements such as Staplehurst, Headcorn, Marden, etc. play in terms of supporting the borough's more rural economy and clusters of employment within the more rural parts of the borough. I've talked quite a lot about workforce productivity at the last committee update, and this is something that has gained increased prominence over the last few years off the back of the government's industrial strategy, which is all about boosting prosperity and earning power across the country. And when you look at the structure of the economy in Maidstone, we can see strong representation in lower value sectors such as retail, education, support services, hospitality. And that means that on a per worker average, productivity within the borough's economy falls behind regional and national averages, as well as the Kent-wide equivalent and the majority of its neighbours, as we can see in the snapshot on that bar chart there. From a business point of view, Maidstone accommodates a sizable business base with just under 8,000 active enterprises. But again, the pace of growth within its business base has lagged behind other parts of Kent, the South East and UK over recent years, as you can see from the bubble chart on the slide there. And whilst new business startup in Maidstone outperforms Kent-wide averages, it still falls behind rates recorded across the wider South East and the UK. And the chart on this slide here shows business births, so business startups, as a proportion of the working age population locally and how that's changed over time, with Maidstone representing the red line on that chart. So some fluctuation over the last few years, just like everywhere else, as you can see, but clearly there's some ground to make up in terms of boosting local levels and rates of enterprise and startup. We've talked quite a lot about business space and business premises at previous meetings and committee meetings. And if you look at the trends in terms of business space in the borough, we can see that the stock of total industrial and office floor space, represented by the red and blue lines on that chart, have gradually been declining within the borough over the last sort of 20 years or so, with Maidstone now accommodating smaller markets than many of its neighbouring areas. And over the last 20 years or so, we've seen retail space increase slightly in the borough, but at a lower level than other parts of Kent and the region and the UK more broadly. And as you might be able to make out on the chart there on the slide, more recent years have seen retail space actually decline in response to changing consumer demand. In comparison to employment, population growth has been much stronger in Maidstone over the last 10 years or so, with a total of nearly 172,000 people now living in the borough. And that's one of the largest resident bases in Kent, as we can see from the bubble chart on the slide there. However, the working age proportion of the population, so that's people broadly within the ages of 16 to 64, has been declining, and that's likely to place pressure on local labour supply in the future, as there's fewer people available locally within that working age bracket to take up employment opportunities and start-up businesses and all that kind of thing. This strong population growth is expected to continue in the future, with the latest government projections suggesting that Maidstone will continue to outperform other areas, as shown by the red line on the chart there. And much of that growth will be characterised by an ageing population, although Maidstone isn't unique in that respect, but as I said just a minute ago, clearly provides a challenge in terms of where that pipeline and supply of working age people are going to come from. Looking at deprivation, so a kind of another sort of population-related indicator, the stats show that the borough ranks relatively well in terms of deprivation overall and when compared with other parts of the country, although clearly that masks some significant variation within the borough, with some entrenched pockets of deprivation found in and around Maidstone town centre in particular, and to the south of the urban area. And the map on the slide there basically shows how different parts and geographies of the borough kind of score and compare in terms of deprivation, with the red and the orange shading representing a high level of deprivation, and those areas that are greener showing relatively less levels of deprivation. Local deprivation isn't particularly acute within a Kent-wide context when we kind of extend out the geography slightly further than the borough, although parts of the borough that face deprivation challenges, as we can see from the red and the orange shades on that map, have seen little change or improvement over the last few years. So it's not getting any better for those areas that do face those constraints. And then finally, in terms of labour markets, the proportion of Maidstone's residents in some form of economic activity comfortably exceeds regional and national averages, as we can see from the red squiggle line on the chart there. But it's fluctuated quite considerably, as we can see, over the past 10 years or so. So it's gone up and it's gone down sort of year by year. It's higher than all of its neighbours at the moment, apart from Tonbridge and Malling, although clearly things will have changed over the past few months as COVID has taken its toll on the local economy and the ability of local people to stay in economic activity and employment. The skills profile of Maidstone's residents broadly matches county, regional and national averages, but with scope for improvement at either end of the spectrum, both in terms of boosting the proportion of residents with high level skills, so that's typically NVQ level 4 and above at the left hand end of the bar chart there, but also upskilling those with no qualifications at all right at the right hand side of the bar chart, to be able to either enter the labour market for the first time or to boost their prospects once they are in it. The borough's location at the heart of Kent means that it shares strong labour market relationships with adjoining areas, in particular with Tonbridge and Malling borough to the west. And they're shown by the heat map on this slide, which illustrates the strongest flows of both in and out commuters to and from the borough. In overall terms, the borough is characterised as a slight net exporter of labour. So that means that there's about 1,180 more residents travelling out of the borough for work than there are travelling in from other authority areas. But yeah, I think the map on that slide really emphasises the relatively self-contained nature of a lot of those commuting flows in and around the borough. So clearly COVID-19 continues to have a significant impact on the borough's economy, with impacts still unfolding as the economic disruption continues and we move through the latest phase of lockdown. And also as the furlough scheme and other financial support for businesses is extended. And we know that in Maidstone's case that there's a reasonable amount of business grants to be distributed, as was mentioned at the outset of the meeting, over the next few weeks. Within the borough, recent surveys underline the severe disruption to day-to-day business operations right across the board in terms of businesses and sectors and locations. And over a quarter of working residents were furloughed as a result of lockdown 1.0. Visits to retail, recreation, workplace venues are still significantly lower than normal. And we know that the scale of impact varies quite considerably by sector, with around a quarter of local employment output and business base accommodated within those sectors at highest risk of short-term economic harm from COVID, such as hospitality, recreation, retail, which not only have been amongst those hardest hit sectors, but also been driving much of the job growth recorded in the borough over recent years and remain locally significant. An emerging scenario suggests that short-term economic impact could be equivalent to about £575 million and 4,000 jobs in the borough during 2020 alone. So all of this, I think, provides an important backdrop to the economic development strategy update and underlines the need to really keep on top of data and intelligence to monitor those real-time impacts as they continue to unfold. And we can see from our analysis of recent economic trends that I've very briefly just run through there, obviously more detail available in the pack, a bit of a patchwork of varied economic characteristics and performance, with significant scope for the borough, I think, to boost its economic contribution over the coming years. And that's exactly the kind of purpose of the strategy, to start to sort of set that out and frame that. And also some pre-existing challenges, I think, are likely to be exacerbated by COVID and the impacts that we've seen over the last few months, particularly in terms of the productive capacity of the local economy and the availability of skilled local residents to take up perhaps new and emerging economic opportunities posed by the pandemic. So clearly the short-term focus of the strategy will need to be around economic recovery and business resilience, whilst also adjusting to those longer-term economic priorities, to reflect the new normal and what that might kind of mean for Maidstone's sort of job base and business base. So hopefully that provides a sort of helpful run through of the key findings from this latest stage of the work. Happy to take any questions and hand back over to you, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Lucy. That's really, really interesting. And actually, I think you made it more interesting taking us through then than when I was reading through it a few days ago. And you highlighted, actually for me, I've got my fingers on about 3 pages here, because I think especially on your last slide when we were talking about the impact of COVID and our economy. Obviously, the workforce productivity, you know, is and showing us down fairly low across in terms of Kent and definitely and also the UK, is obviously because of our, you know, I think our town centre and our economy is heavily dominated by the sort of leisure and retail sectors, which are perhaps relatively low-paying areas. At the same time, I think, as you said, those are some of the sectors which are most impacted by COVID. And it actually, you know, and the other thing that sort of ties up with that to some extent is when we looked at that floor space, because I know we're, as part of our local plan, looking to preserve as much or all of our employment land and actually to generate more. But when we look at the decline, and it's on, if people look at page 33 of the agenda pack, you just see that decline in terms of the office and industrial square footage in the borough, and then when you compare it on the table adjacent to that to some of our neighbouring authorities, I suppose that's all part of indicating what you were saying, Lucy, is that the extent of the challenge we've actually got to ensure that Maidstone remains vibrant and that we don't just become a dormitory suburb for other areas. So I think this is, personally, I find there's a lot of information here which really highlights points we do need to look at, and I'm sure our officers will be working through with yourselves in terms of taking us forward. I don't know if other people would like to ask questions or comments at this point. If you could use the IM, please.
Paul, yes, Martin.
Yeah.
Martin Round.
Yeah, no, go ahead, Martin.
I mean, I sound like a real sad so-and-so. Data usually is absolutely boring to a lot of people, but like you, Chair, I found that absolutely fascinating. I was absolutely, I mean, it was, you know, there's good bits and there's bad bits, but I found it absolutely fascinating to actually identify some of the things that are actually going on. What concerns me is that we are engaging some obviously very able consultants, and they're producing this data. Obviously our own economic development team are here, but is there a way in which we can continue to monitor this sort of data on a regular basis? I'm not saying weekly, but maybe on some form of term, on a regular basis, so we can always keep up to date. I'm thinking particularly how we can keep up to date with the COVID issues, but you know, I'd love to be able to keep up to date with this data on a regular basis, because I just love it.
I think you're right, Martin. I mean, there's so much here. It would be interesting, perhaps, Chris, if you could answer that point as to how we could keep this sort of data.
Yes. There are certain data sets that come out more regularly on a monthly basis. We already record unemployment rate by districts and by wards. There is other data as well, excuse me, that we can keep. And we had discussions on whether we might be able to work with our colleagues in digital team to sort of set up like quite a simple economic sort of dashboard, which when regular statistics come in, we can update that, and then that could be shared. So we could do a little bit more on it, but certainly, you know, that is something we can do, and if it's what people would like to see, we'd be very happy to do that for you.
Well, then I fully endorse that.
Yeah, no, I think it really would be, because it's going to be one of the ways, sort of having this sort of a database given to us on a frequent thing. As once we've agreed the economic development strategy, it's going to enable us to sort of benchmark how we're doing, aren't we? Because there's certain things here and some trends here we clearly have to stop some of the declines and get things moving back up. And I think having the data on a regular basis will enable us to make sure that the strategies we'll adopt early in the new year, are working, as we reiterate it. So yeah, I think that's really good.
One thing I would like to point out, though, is a number of the key sort of statistic indicators, they get collected on an annual basis. So we can keep that as up to date as possible, but there are certain data sets where it just currently doesn't come out on a sort of more regular basis.
No, I mean, I think that's fine. I mean, I'm sure it's a mixture of, quarterly and some of the monitoring we will need to do, I think, probably is on an annual basis.
Yeah. But
it's only when you look on a longer time, you can actually say, have we increased square footage of floor space? Yeah. Anyway, thanks for that, Chris. At the moment, we've got Martin Cox, rather than Martin, and we'll have a cup of coffee, and then Bob. So Martin, over to you.
White none, thank you. On page 28, if I could ask, we've got the workforce productivity, and you see Maidstone there sort of with Swale and Ashford behind us. How would we improve that? What sort of things would we be planning to attract, or is it that? Do we have to attract different types of industry, different types of businesses to increase this, or am I barking up the wrong tree? And I suppose that was for the very nice lady who gave the marvellous presentation.
That would be me.
Yeah, sorry, I couldn't see her name in front of me.
So I think that there's not just one way of going about it. I mean, part of the sort of solution or the response to boosting local kind of workforce productivity is around that sector mix, as you mentioned, and attracting higher value sectors and activities to come to the borough and to operate here and to employ local people. And I guess going back to some of the discussions earlier tonight, initiatives like the Innovation Centre are key to that, to trying to kind of diversify into those kind of slightly higher value kind of sectors. So that's clearly got to be a key part of it, albeit it's competitive out there, and other places are equally trying to do similar types of activities and initiatives. The other aspect, I suppose, is thinking about the businesses we already have here, the sectors we already have here, and how they can be supported or encouraged to be more productive themselves. So, whether that's kind of through technology or accessing, sort of new markets, opportunities, and actually driving up the value and the contribution that employees and businesses that are already here and operating can driving up their existing contribution. So I think a successful approach to that and an effective approach to that would have to take in both factors, both aspects.
So you think it's us being proactive and going out and looking at the sector mix and people who are making inquiries and going out to them? So is it we've got to push Chris Inwood out onto the road and go and get people to come here? Is that the sort of thing we've got to do?
Well, yeah, I mean that's part of it, isn't it?
Okay.
And that kind of outward-looking promotional, activity, I think is important. But I'd say it's not the only. No.
It was good to be at MIPIM so that people could see we were at that level, and I think we were there with the bigger boys as well. And but yeah, expensive process, but perhaps one that needs to be looked at again. Thank you.
Thank you, Martin. Bob, I think you wanted to make a comment.
Yes, if I may, please. I found this report quite depressing. I hate to say this. I can recall spending quite some time once in the theatre behind the Hazlitt, working out the key points in which we were going to sell Maidstone to the public. And one of them, which I've heard the leader say on many occasions and put into print, is that Maidstone is a thriving place. But when I read this, I find that 3.1, 312, 313, 314, 315, 320, and 322, so it's not just one or two, it's a lot of them, are all going down. and I find this gloomy. I wish someone could cheer me up on this. Thank you.
I think the thing is, Bob, I think what it's doing is showing us the challenge we have, and I think.
Oh yes.
But I think I mean we to think on some of the positives, isn't it? Say I mean over the last 4 or 5 years, I mean with the success we had with the business terrace, which the council went into, and that's actually resulted in the private sector now starting to develop similar sort of startup office spaces in the town centre. So, and also obviously currently the Medical Innovation Centre, which Martin referred to earlier when we were looking at the agenda setting. So I think the council is doing stuff. I think, if you like, the quantum of what we need to do, we need to sort of work out, probably that we're working with Lucy and Chris and stuff, how we can sort of do a step change up, because our population's going up. And the things which shocked me probably most here is the floor space of sort of industrial floor space going down, when we know we've spoken as a committee, and I know the strategic planning and infrastructure, because both David Burton and myself are committed to us helping to expand manufacturing and light industry, because those are high quality and high skilled jobs, which will be part of addressing Martin's concerns on how we get our productivity up. But to see those actual spaces, over that time, that decline, not only do we have to arrest that, but I think we've got to push that right in the opposite direction, because we are the business capital of Kent, and we need to we just need to work out how we can take the initiative back and just push forward, so that, as we all want to. And I think you're right, there is some fairly sobering reading in this report, isn't there?
If I may, Martin, I think that the good thing about this report is that it's brought it out into the open, and it's focusing members' minds on this.
Yeah, well said, Bob.
Yeah.
I think this is what should be used now as a new direction for going forward. We cannot be complacent. This report highlights that we mustn't be complacent, and there are things that need addressing urgently.
Definitely. And I look forward to us working over the next year or so as we address all these points and, really push forward, because that's what we need to do. Would anybody else at this stage like to say? Martin Cox, did you want to come back in?
Yeah, if I may come back before I start to pick through the points that Bob's highlighted there with his new marker pen, obviously. Could I ask Lucy Bailey, if she was caught in a lift with somebody and was asked, would you please concisely give over your view of where Maidstone sits compared to its neighbours, and how it sits in the county as to its position to try and be and claim to be the business capital of Kent? Would you say that is a fair representation?
What are its unique selling points?
Lucy,
well, I think if you look at just from a basic data point of view, I think the data supports that view that it's the business capital of Kent. The kind of scale and size of the business base, the kind of mix of sectors. I think that's difficult to kind of question that. But I think in terms of I know you mentioned things about, around the kind of business terrace and great examples of things that have been happening recently to try and, boost the profile and support, entrepreneurialism and all that kind of thing in the borough. I think there's still significant scope and opportunity to kind of raise the borough's game and really kind of send out a more positive message about the opportunities and the kind of great things that are going on locally. And I think other parts of Kent are doing that more more explicitly and very kind of successfully. So I think that's going to be a big part of the strategy that we're working on at the moment is using that as a vehicle to kind of go out and be more positive and send out that
remain
really
positive. Yeah, that's exactly what you're saying. Not the previous. Okay, thank you very much, Lucy.
Any other comments from any members at all? Points I'd like to raise a clarification. Can I just ask Lucy one question, following on really from Martin, because I look at 3.2 and I suppose that concerns me, which is around resident skills, and it's sort of saying that whilst the average sort of skills within the borough or within our population are improving, they're improving at a lower rate, not only than in Kent, but across the southeast and the UK. And I mean, what sort of issues do you think we need? I mean, addressing that to me seems fundamental.
Since we don't touch on education that much, no.
Well, no, but I mean, it's as much as, what are the types of drivers you would, we might have working with partners, and at the end of the day, we're working in partnership with people to try to do that, because we do need a higher skill, higher resident skills.
Do you mean in terms of the kind of high level skills and how the borough can support its residents to Well, I mean, I guess that, again, there's different aspects to this, isn't there? There's the sort of early years aspirational kind of point, which I know has come up a number of times when part of the discussions that we've been having on the strategy, and how partnerships and providers can kind of work together to really to address that and maximise awareness about the kind of opportunities available locally for people when they get to sort of the labour market kind of phase of their kind of life. And I guess part of it's about the provision that's available kind of locally, particularly in terms of kind of further education, and I know we've been talking a lot with the college about this recently. Again, maximising awareness about opportunities to get involved in things like apprenticeships and high level apprenticeships in those areas that are locally significant and where local employers are crying out for individuals to kind of come and help them and support their kind of local growth. So I think it's going to be a combination of different things, but and some of that's about partnership working, I think, and again, that's the role of the strategy update to really sort of shine a light on that and start to set out kind of next steps and actions and initiatives that the council can be working on in partnership with others to try and instill some of those things.
Thank you very much for that. So I'll just do one last check that nobody else has any other questions they'd like to ask Lucy. Speak now or forever hold your silence, as they say. In which case, I'd like to, the recommendations on page 6 is to agree that we note the State of the Nation report. So yeah, can we agree to do that, please?
Agreed.
And also, Chris, remember that we do want regular sort of monitoring and updates.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, great. Thanks very much, and thank you very much, Lucy, for coming and addressing us this evening.
No problem. Thank you very much for having me. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, thank you, Chris, as well. So, if we could now go on to our second quarter financial update and monitoring performance report, which is on pages 54 to 75 of our agenda pack. Let me just check. So if I could ask if Ellie and Orla would like to introduce their relevant parts of the report, please. So over to you.
Thank you, Chairman, and good evening, members. So this is the second quarterly financial update and performance monitoring report, which shows the position against the budget and performance indicators at the end of September. So starting off with the numbers, for this committee was reporting an overspend of 124,000 at the end of quarter 2. Our current projections are that this position is likely to deteriorate by the end of the financial year, and that's largely as a consequence of the ongoing legal claim from Serco in relation to the leisure centre, which was reported to the committee at the end of quarter 1. So the £500,000 variance against that item remains a provision at this stage. So that means it's just an allowance that we're setting aside, which is an estimate of the potential costs we may expect to incur. At this stage, those negotiations are still ongoing. In relation to this, the government has also recently announced that it's making £100 million of funding available to support council leisure providers, and we will, of course, be submitting a bid for a share of this once the application process has been announced. There's some larger variances for the areas within this committee which are detailed within Appendix 1. The majority of the adverse variances, as you can probably expect, arise from the closure of facilities run either by the council or contractors during lockdown. So in some areas, we are anticipating there might be some further impact from the current lockdown measures, which at the time of writing the report were kind of just about being announced. So that's not currently reflected in the figures that you have in front of you. On a slightly more optimistic note, we are expecting that we will be able to offset some of the income shortfall against government funding. So we've submitted our first claim under the government sales fees and charges compensation scheme, and we're expecting to receive our first instalment towards the end of this month. So this, along with any financial support we're able to access in relation to the leisure centre, will help us to offset the overall very significant budget overspend that we are currently forecasting for the council. So at this point, I'll hand over to Orla to present the information on performance monitoring. I'll be happy to take any questions on the finances after that. Thank you.
Good evening, members. The performance appendix can be found on pages 72 to 75 of the agenda. 2 of the 5 targeted indicators achieved their Q2 target and 3 missed target by more than 10%. These indicators are continuing to be impacted by COVID measures. The museum reopened at the start of Q2 with social distancing measures in place. Visitor numbers have been low. It wasn't possible to reintroduce the full summer holiday events programme, and there was no uptake of the educational service as face-to-face services were not recommended. The learning team at the museum have, however, diversified its offer and have worked full-time to create an online learning resource across social media platforms. By September, they had received 5,275 views across Facebook and Twitter. The number of users at the leisure centre also failed to meet its Q2 target. The number of visitors had started to increase since its reopening. However, its capacity and the number of sessions offered were restricted in line with the measures required for it to reopen safely. The last indicator reportable to you is untargeted, the percentage of unemployed people in the Maidstone area on out-of-work benefits. Numbers show unemployment has risen significantly in comparison to Q2 last year. Finally, there was an error in the reporting of visitor numbers to the museum at Q4 last year, which was also shown in the end-of-year outturn report. This is fully detailed on page 75 of your papers this evening. It was reported that there were 35,702 visitors to the museum. This figure should have been 15,417 against a target of 17,000, which means that the target was missed, but it did remain within 10%. Numbers were obviously affected by the early impact of COVID. Thank you, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much. Can I ask if anyone would like to ask any questions at this stage of the officers? I've got a couple. When I was going through this, and I just got to find them again now. The market. I don't know if obviously the market was closed during lockdown, but I don't know if anyone knows quite how it's doing since it's reopened. Because I know initially there was a big burst of a number of new stalls that Alexa managed to get quite a lot of new stall holders in, but as to whether that's continued or not, because obviously, is the market going to recover or go back to, it wasn't doing well over a long period of time previously, was it? I don't know if either Orla or Ali have got any, any information at all.
Chairman, I do have some information from Alexa about that. I think in relation to the questions you raised during the briefing, Alexa, she said that obviously the market was closed during the first quarter of the year because due to lockdown. She has provided a performance comparison for the point at which the market reopened in mid-June to last Saturday, and that's compared with the same period in 2019. So I can talk you through that now. So in 2019, on the Saturday market, first of all, there were 252 market stalls plus boot fair traders of 359, so total 611. This year in 2020, for the same period, there are 616. Apparently that figure would have been around 643, but it was only possible to offer stalls to providers of essential goods as of last Saturday. Boot fairs have not been running this year as there were some concerns about how they could be run safely. I think that, and Alexa speculated that had it not been for the pandemic, and if we had been able to run boot fairs, that obviously performance would have been much better this year.
Well, thank you for that. That's quite encouraging, some of those figures, I think, and shows the work which I know we discussed at our last meet over Lock Meadow that Alexa's achieving. I think one of the things, obviously, on the KPIs is unemployment is very concerning, especially when we were looking at our earlier report on the state of the local economy, and that's going to be one heavily to monitor going forward. Yeah, so that's really it, because I mean, everything else is really pointing, as you'd expect with COVID and lockdowns, isn't it? We're going to foul on most of our turnover. It's good to see the footfall in the town centre, given that the targets have been reset, is coming back in trend with where we hoped. So I think that's quite encouraging. Martin, would you want to ask a question?
Yeah, it's just a brief thing. Do we have any feedback from any of the stall holders in Lock Meadow as to how they feel it's going?
I think that's a question we probably need to take away. I'm sure we can find out and report back to the committee by email, if that's agreeable.
Yes, I'm sure I can assist you with that, Ellie.
Yeah, okay, yeah. If you come back on that.
Thanks, Ola.
Okay. The other Martin now wants to ask a question.
Well, wasn't Faye before me? I don't know what the time she put that in. If she wasn't, I'm happy to proceed.
Sorry, Faye. Sorry, yeah, okay, Faye, and then you, Martin.
Yeah, I think I just wanted to certainly thank Ola for the KPI. It must have been quite difficult to prepare that, but you very clearly presented it. Thank you. And Ellie, thank you to you as well. I'm having a bit of a blank moment. Not just one, I hasten to add, but I frightened myself and looked on page 67 on the revenue, budget and outturn. Columns F and G. I cannot understand the forecast for the 31st of March 2020 and the forecast variance for 31st of March 2020. Can you please just reframe it for me? I think my brain has scrambled and I don't know what on earth you're talking about. I'm so sorry.
Yeah, no problem at all. It's worth saying on columns F and G, obviously, at this point in time, there are a lot of uncertainties that we're dealing with.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, they're very much change. Effectively, column F is what we are expecting to spend from up until the end of the year, so sort of the whole year spend, or if it's a negative figure, what we would expect to generate in income. And then that variance would just measure that against the budget. So if it's a nil variance, we're expecting to be that we will be kind of more or less where we'd budgeted for. If it's in red, we're expecting to be doing worse than that.
Got it. Oh, so you mean 31st of March 2021?
Yeah, that's a very good point. Thank you for identifying that. It is projecting forward for the end of the year.
So you see, it's not you that scrambled, it's Ellie that
absolutely,
scrambled.
It's me. I didn't even notice that when you asked the question. But yeah, hopefully that's clear now. That was our mistake and I apologise.
It's fallen into, I understand. But again, there's so much uncertainty, isn't there? But we certainly thank you for the report anyway.
Thank you.
Martin.
It's the COVID mist, Ellie. Right, just looking here, not only do we not have boot fairs, but also auctions weren't able to be carried out, and that is quite a chunk of the income stream across the market realm. I did too bump into in a conversation with Alexa. The newer stalls that were enticed back haven't remained on the whole. I believe 3 or 4 have, and that's not continually. There was a very good influx and a good cross section of market stalls down there. I was certainly there at the first 2 open it when we reopened. And it was very promising, and a lot of people saying how pleased they were that it was coming back. I also feel that potentially a lot of other market areas in the southeast don't have what we can offer, and that is a covered market area. So I think these are the things we should be promoting. Come to Maidstone and not only keep dry while you have your stall, but your customers keep dry as well. And you couldn't get much of a closer car park than the one we can provide right next door. Yes, the figures are daunting. The amounts of money are climbing when we look at the leisure centre and the adventure zone and things like that. But please be aware that certainly from this committee, we appreciate the work that goes on, although these gusts of wind come past us and towards us and try and knock us off our course. And I'm encouraged by the positivity from our staff that carry on going through this, and they turn up to meetings and they're in their kitchens or wherever they are. Please carry on, and thank you very much, certainly from this committee. Thank you.
Yeah, I'd just like to endorse that. I mean, it's only through the hard work of everybody keeping all of our services going over the pandemic that we're in the situation we are, where we've got the museum running, we've got, the adventure zone was successful, the leisure centres have been reopened, and the market and all the other services we're responsible for, plus the work done by the economic team in terms of supporting the council and the public more so through the first and the second lockdowns of all the work they're doing.
And the business grants, Paul.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say, the business grants, and also now the discretionary grants again. I mean, we've got a fabulous team of people.
Yes.
But not only supporting us, but supporting the whole of Maidstone Council. And I think as an authority, we should be proud of our staff. They're the great asset which makes Maidstone, I think, as an authority, pump above its weight across, not just in Kent, but on a wider scale. So thank you, everybody. So if we can agree to...
Excuse me, Chairman, before you agree anything, you've made me think. We've got the Pride of Maidstone. Oh, no, that's a ship. There's the awards ceremony for staff coming up soon. I think it's in the summer sometime. And I do think that the words you said about our great staff are worth capturing, so that either in a message from the chief exec or when we have the next highlight event for staff, because I absolutely agree with everything you said. We've had great staff, and I'm sorry to interrupt the meeting, but I wanted to capture what you said.
It's our Vox Pops ready, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you for that, Faye. And I'm just flicking through the report. Oh, here we are. The recommendations are on page 55. So if I could ask everyone if we can look at page 55. And we have 3 recommendations, and I'll move them. Well, actually, John's just sent something in the IM saying that unemployment in October had gone down a little bit, which obviously is good news. And that's the continuation of the furlough scheme through until March will obviously help a lot of people locally, and so that's good as well. And Alison's added something. Picking up a phrase about the Strive Award, yeah.
I couldn't think what it was. Thank you for that, Alison, because my brain is now scrambled. Thank you.
Well, don't worry, Faye, I'm sure it's not. Okay, so, sorry, again, on page 55, the recommendations, and I'll just read them out just for the record.
Just a note.
So the first is that the revenue position at the end of Q2 for 2020-21, including the actions being taken or proposed to improve the position, where significant variations have been identified be noted, and then secondly, let the capital position at the end of quarter 2 be noted, and finally, let the performance monitor position at quarter 2 for 2020-21, including the actions taken or proposed, are also noted. So can we agree to note all 3 of those?
Agreed.
Noted.
Agreed. Fine.
Okay.
Agreed.
Okay. Thank you, everybody. Well, that takes us to the end of the public part of our agenda tonight. Our final item is obviously on yellow pages, so it's in a confidential session. So before I move that we go into confidential, looking at the time, I just wondered if people might like to take advantage of switching from one session to another to have, say, a 5-minute comfort break as well. Would that make sense?
Could I just come in, Joe? I can't stay for yellow pages, can I?
No.
No.
No. But at a normal council meeting in the town hall, I would have been able to stay, would I? Or
No.
Not at all. All right then. Nice to see you all. Goodbye.
Okay. Bye, David. So I'll read out the motion we have to agree. So I'll move that the public, although I don't think there are any, be excluded for the items set out in part 2 of the agenda because of the likely disclosure of exempt information for the reasons specified, having applied the public interest test. Can I have a seconder for that, please?
I'll second it.
Right, thank you. Can we agree that then? Yeah.
Agreed.
All agreed, definitely.
Right. So we now need to log off this session to log on to the other one, which Olivia gave us. And shall I suggest that perhaps we reconvene? It's what, at 8:35, just to give people a 4-minute break? Yep.
Chairman,
Yes.
apologies for the interruption. Would you just be able to confirm that the committee won't be returning to public session?
Oh, sorry, yes, we won't be returning to public session. There's no other items on the public part of the agenda. Unless I've missed something.
No, just